The Bothy Storytelling Podcast is a member of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB. And welcome one and all to another Bothy Storytelling Podcast. I'm your host, Calum, Lykan. And this podcast is a little bit late because I discovered something in the last couple of weeks that when you're a professional travelling performer, in my case a storyteller, sometimes you don't have time to be at home. And that's what's happened. The last couple of weeks I've been up and down the province of Alberta. I've been all over Slave Lake. I've been at Bonnyville. This weekend I'm in Viking. I've literally been travelling back and forth thousands of kilometres, visiting schools and libraries and all over the place telling wonderful tales. So I thought I would basically entitle this episode Travelling Tales. But travel is a great thing. I mean, I thoroughly enjoy it. I mean, when I go about the province, obviously I drive, I get to see the scenery, I get to enjoy all these wonderful and new places. And some of the roads are, well, they're a little bit bare and barren and dull to drive, but others are just beautiful and epic with wonderful scenery. But the downside is, I've never ever seen any of this fabled wildlife that Canada supposedly offers. There's apparently bears and moose and dragons out there. Basically, Canada's supposed to be filled with all these wonderful creatures, and the most I've ever seen is a rabbit and maybe a deer when the blasted things step out in front of you on the highway and look at you as if it's like, well, why are you here? You know, I'm just walking, but why are you here? They drive me insane because they just, I don't know, they've got a weird death wish, it would appear. But the last couple of weeks have been absolutely fantastic. As I say, I've been up in Slave Lake. I did a lovely little community centre at Flatbush en route. Did Slave Lake Library. I did one of the schools in Slave Lake and then moved on to this lovely little community called Smith. And I did their local school, which was literally the whole school, K to 8. 75 students, and it was just one of the greatest wee gigs I've done in a while, and it was so much fun, and the kids were just so happy and appreciative of what I was doing. And then recently I was up in Bonnyville at their library, and what a lovely little place that is as well. And it's just, you know, they brought in a few of the local schools, different age groups. They'd all won a competition for drawing and poetry to come and hear some stories. And the questions and all the fun, I'll tell you. Some of those kids, man, they're just too smart for their own good. In Smith, there was this lovely wee lassie. She was only a kindergarten age. She had a wee bit of a frock of red hair on her. And I told the story, why is the sea salt? Why the sea is salt. And after it, she raised her hand and blew me away with the question. Kindergarten. A wee slip of a lassie she was. And she looked up and said, now, the thing I don't get about that story is how could they survive under the water with all those tons of pressure bearing down upon them? And I just thought, oh, you're good. You've got me. And it was great. Just the fact that a wee lassie at that age, so young, thought so much about the story, had listened to it, and then threw out that question. That was just brilliant to me. That just made me so damn happy. Mainly because they'd listened. You know, that's the first most important thing, the fact that they'd listened to me. That made me very, very happy. But no, my journeys have been really cool. Really good fun. They've been a wee bit sad as well. I'll tell you a wee bit about that in a moment. But one of the more freaky things is, you know, I'm talking about all the wildlife in Alberta, and I haven't seen it, and I'd love to. I mean, the problem is most of the people that know me don't want me to ever see the wildlife. They know I've got this thing that I really want to hug a bear. Apparently it's not the done thing. I don't know. What do they know? You know, you've got to hug a bear at least once in your life, I feel. But the other side of Alberta and certainly Canada that I'm not used to is the weather. I was driving up to Bonnyville, and we were getting like 90, 100 kilometre an hour winds. Now, I'm used to that in Scotland, but what I didn't know is it was because there's been a few tornadoes touching down, and this is kind of the tail end of them. But as I was driving by a little place called St. Paul's, I was thinking, God, it's really windy and it's a bit dark and grey here, and I just kept powering through and powering through. I then discovered that I'd pretty much driven by a tornado. One had touched down in St. Paul's within a time scale of when I had been driving through. I like to call it the oblivious Scotsman, because that is certainly what I appear to be. I am completely oblivious to so many things that happen around me now. So many things that could potentially end my life. I don't know if this is a good thing, a bad thing. I don't know. I think it's just one of those strange life things. As I've always said to people, you don't need to worry about a Scotsman. There's only 3 things that will ever kill a Scotsman. 1 is alcohol. 2 is our deep-fried diet and love of foods of that type. And 3 is our wives. They're the only 3 things that can effectively kill a Scotsman. Nothing else can. We're a pretty sturdy, hardy race. Or is it just because we're oblivious and blunder through life that way? Who knows? But my travels have been great fun. They've been amazing, just so great. And as I say, there's more to come. I'm up in Viking. I'm back in Lethbridge shortly. I'm heading back over to Cochrane to do events. Then I'm up in Gimli. Oh, before that, of course, over in Peterborough on the East Coast, doing a conference. Then I'm in Gimli, and then I am doing the Edmonton's Kids Fringe. So I have a great time. Oh, and Devon in between. And then I'm off to Morinville. Yeah, it's good fun, travelling. Doing what I do and travelling, I get to see wonderful places, interesting little towns, and just have fun. But sadness befell this trip. Because as I was travelling, something happened. And that something made me really, really sad. I only discovered it when I was heading back up to the Bonnyville trip. But somewhere in Slave Lake, I lost a very precious possession. Since coming to Canada, I've lost a couple of wee things. One is my kilt pin. I had a really beautiful kilt pin. It was a Targe design, and the problem was the latch was always loose, and I was out one day going to go and do a photo shoot. I think it was for the Scottish Bedtime Stories CD, and it just fell off my kilt, and I was so sad. It just broke my heart. I loved that kilt pin. It was quite unique and really hard to replace. So that disappeared, but the worst thing that I've lost happened somewhere. And I think it happened at Smith. I've got a feeling when I took my kilt stuff off and dumped it in the boot of the trunk, out of my satchel, something fell. And it was a little bit of home. It was a stone. And it was a stone that I have had with me since I began my storytelling journey. It had some carvings on it. It was beautiful. It was hand carved in Scotland. It was a Scottish stone. It was a wee bit of home. And it was actually from the west coast of Scotland, so it really was connecting me back to my homeland. And I carried it about wherever I went, and every storytelling event I've done, bar Bonnyville, that stone has been on me. And it was a stone that I also used for telling some stories. So when I discovered it was gone, I got really sad. I got really upset, because that's a wee bit of Scotland. That's a wee bit of my home. And now it's gone. I'll never see that stone again. And that does make me a wee bit sad. But I also have to look at the positive of it. That stone has travelled and journeyed, and now somewhere out in Canada, that stone is there. A little bit of Scotland is sitting there. And I really kind of hope that maybe one of the kids from the school, if it was lost at Smith, find it and realise that it is something a wee bit more important and a bit more precious than just a normal stone, and they hold on to it. And maybe they travel with it and take it round the world, and that stone gets to continue its journey. It's seen some great places. It's been into Europe, it's been all over the UK, it's been into America and Canada. That stone has done wonders with me. So I kind of hope it continues. And even if one of those kids don't travel with it, just hope they look after it if they do find it, because that is a Scottish stone. That is my stone, or somebody else's stone now, and I'm never going to find it again, and it just makes me really sad. And a man shouldn't get upset about a stone, but I'm not going to lie to you. I was driving all the way up to Bonnyville, and every so often that stone would cross my mind, and I'd just be like, oh no, I've lost my stone. Kind of pathetic, probably. You guys are listening to this going, what the heck is he talking about? He's crying over a stone. Well, hey guys, that stone was important to me. It was carved. It was Scottish. It has been with me since I started my storytelling journey, and now it's moved on. It's travelled on. It's taken its own journey. That doesn't not mean that I can't miss my stone. Okay? Just let's live with it. But the story I used to tell was based around that stone. And I'll tell you that one today, actually, because I think it's kind of important for me to tell that wee story today, just because of my journeys. And it's a travelling tale. But the problem is I usually do it with an audience and interact with the audience. So it's going to kind of be weird trying to do it without the audience interaction. But before we do that, let's have a wee word from one of our sponsors. The Rotary Club of Edmonton West, on behalf of its entire district, invites you to dream, connect and inspire at the District 5370 Conference in October. A number of stellar speakers, both local and international, are sharing their stories at this conference. Among them, Susan Maurice, founder and chairwoman of Belize Natural Energy. She is a geologist, an explorer and a deal maker with a passion for the protection of our environment and a vision to uncover the true potential of everyone she meets. The conference is open to the general public. It will also attract Rotarians from all over Western Canada and the world, which means you'll be in a room with some of the kindest and most community-minded people around. So come to the Shaw Conference Centre in Edmonton from October the 18th to the 20th. Learn more at conference530-2018.ca. That's conference530-2018.ca. So the story that I love to tell and used my beloved ex-stone for was, in fact, stone soup. It's probably one most of you know. It's probably one that you've heard, but I absolutely adore it. And the version that I love is obviously a traveller version from Scotland. And it starts with a traveller. And his whole life is about going from town to town, village to village, living free and doing odd jobs for bed, for food, and maybe a coin or two for his purse. And that's what this traveller did. He travelled from town to town, village to village. Now he got up early one morning, realising that he'd finished all the odd jobs in the wee settlement he was in. So he decided to head out to the wilderness to find a new place and hopefully some new work. And it was a beautiful day. The sun was in the heavens, the sky was blue, the grass under his feet was soft and green, and the birds and the beasts were singing their song. And our traveller headed out into the world to enjoy. Now as he travelled, he marvelled at the beauty of the day. And he started to dream and think about stories and think about things that he could do, because one of the treats of the travellers visiting your village was after the odd jobs were done, the stories could be told. They would sit round a fire and tell stories, so everybody enjoyed a traveller coming to their town. And as he wandered, he thought and dreamed and enjoyed the day. And it wasn't until he noticed the sun slowly starting to dip that he realised he daydreamed his whole day away. And all of a sudden he realises he's nowhere to stay. He can't see a settlement. He starts to wonder, is he going to have to sleep rough tonight? But as he glances the horizon, luck is on his side. For there, over a hill, he sees a wee wisp of smoke rising. It can only be from a chimney. So he starts to let his feet take him that way. And sure enough, in no time at all, he starts to enter the most beautiful little village he has seen. In fact, it's so beautiful, he can't believe it. The thatched roofs are all perfect. The gardens are immaculate. There's not a chip of paint on any of the windowsills. And as our traveller starts to take all this in, it dawns on him. If there's no thatch out of place, if there's no gardening work to be done, if there's no painting to be done, how's he going to find a place to lay his head, or some food to fill his belly, or some gold for his purse? He starts to wonder if there's any work here at all. But he's arrived. He's got to try, so he walks up to the first door and knocks on it, expecting the usual reception. But when that door's opened, he can't believe what happens. The person who opens it's like, get out of here. We didn't want your sort in our town. Our traveller can't believe this. He's never ever received such a welcome. Normally, they're always welcomed or at least acknowledged, and even if there's no work, they're thanked for asking. Well, our traveller thinks maybe they're just having a wee bad day. I'll try the next door. And he knocks on it, but again, get out of here. We didn't want your sort here at all. You're no welcome. He cannot believe his ears. But you know what? Third time lucky. I'll try the last door here. Maybe they'll be in a better mood. But sadly not. He knocks, it's answered, and he's treated the same way. And our traveller can't believe it. Never in all these days has he ever received such a welcome to anywhere. Well, he thinks there's nothing for it. I'll have to go and sleep rough. He'd seen a wee forest down the road. He'll go and make himself a wee camp and sleep rough. It's not a hardship for him. It's just not his favourite thing to do. So he starts to walk out the wee village. And as he does, he glances back just to have one last look into it, thinking what a horrid little place it really is. And that's when he sees it. Right at the heart of the village. How could he have missed it? A wee townhouse. And trust me, it's thatch. Well, there was more holes than thatch. The garden, well, if you could call it a garden, it just looked like a dung pile. And the windows had no paint on them, just a few wee flecks of what used to be. And our traveller thinks to himself, this is it. This is salvation. This is where I'll find some work. This wee house surely needs some help. So he walks up to the door, straightens himself up, tucks in his shirt, knocks on the door, puts on his best smile and waits. And when the door's opened, he wishes he hadn't bothered. For what answers that door is one of the worst looking wee sour-faced wifeys he's ever seen. And she's a tongue to match her looks, bitter and twisted and vile. And our poor traveller receives the worst tongue lashing of his life. Abuse, venom and bile are all thrown his way. So much so he's almost bent over backwards with it. And when it finishes, all he can do is shake his head. He can't even say anything. He can't believe what's happening here. He spins on his heels and just starts to walk away, thinking, I'm never coming back here. Oh no, I don't know what's happened in this wee village, but I'm never coming back here. Never have I met such vile people. I'm never gonna return here ever. And that thought keeps going through his head until it dawns on him. Well, if I'm never going to come back, maybe I should have a wee bit of fun while I'm still here. And with that thought, a wee grin appears on his face and he spins on his heels. He walks back up to that wee sour-faced wifey and starts, Madam, I think you've misunderstood me. I've just realised that you obviously thought I'd come to beg for some work, maybe to mend your thatch or do your garden or paint your windowsills. No, you have misunderstood me. I actually was only going to ask for one thing. I was going to ask for some water. You see, I've got my pot here, and I just was going to ask for some water because you know what? Luck was on my side. When I came into your beautiful village, I found the most spectacular stone. And all I want to do is make some soup. Now, the wee wifey stares blank-faced for a few minutes and then realises what he said, and she asks him to repeat himself. So the traveller does. Madam, some water for my pot. Found a stone. Would like to make some soup. Now, this wee old wifey is one of those bitter types, but she also loves humiliating people. On hearing this, she immediately sees an opportunity to make this man look foolish. So that pot is ripped out of his arm and nearly taken his arm with it. But she runs in to grab water, and the glee on her face when she comes out and he's already started a wee fire. He takes the pot, he sits it on the fire and waits, and soon enough the water starts to bubble and boil, and he takes his stone and he drops it into the pot. Well, he watches it. He watches the water bubble and boil. He sniffs it and starts to make noises. Oh, that smells good. He takes a wee wooden spoon from his pouch and stirs it and soaks it up, and oh, that's bra. You know, that soup, that's going to be a great soup. That just needs a wee bit longer, and that's going to be a fine, fine soup. And he stirs it and sniffs it and tastes it, and then he's... Something's no right. You know, there's something just missing from... I'm such a dunderhead. If only I'd remembered some salt, this would be the finest soup ever. Now, our wee wifey is now standing a wee bit confused at hearing all this. This is not what she expected. So when she hears salt, she's too confused to even challenge. She thinks, I've got a wee bit of salt in the house. So she spins on her heels and grabs some salt, and he throws it in and he stirs it and he tastes it, and this is great. This is a great soup, he says. Now, by this point, he's attracted the attention of the rest of the village, and word has spread that there's some traveller making soup from a stone. So they've all gathered round, and he knows from the murmurs they're curious and interested, so he starts to make more noise. Taste the soup, exclaim how tasty it is, and they're all leaning in, looking all excited and confused, and then he begins to play the orchestra. You know, this soup is great. This is going to be one of the finest soups I've ever had, but I'm an idiot. I really am. I can't believe I did this. I was walking into your village and there was fields of them, and I can't believe I didn't grab any. If only I'd pulled a few of those potatoes from the ground, that would have made this soup spectacular. And of course, someone in the group is now hearing this and they're thinking, well, I've got a couple old potatoes in the house. I could just... And away they go and get them, and the potatoes go in. He tastes it. Potato and salt. That makes a great... You know... Do you know what goes so good with potatoes, though? Some leeks. And again, someone thinks, I've got a few spare leeks I can provide. And they go and the leeks go in. And then he just starts, carrots, chicken, beef, a wee bit of stock, a little bit of herbs. Anyone got any pepper? And he keeps just saying things that would make the soup great. And of course, everyone that hears is so confused and so amazed that this pot of soup from a stone is being made that they just start throwing things in. And then the whole village stands there in absolute awe as they look at a huge bubbling pot of beautiful soup made from nothing but a stone. Well, our traveller's a good guy. And he tells everyone in the village to go get a wee bowl, and he serves them all out some soup. And the whole village agrees that this is the finest soup they have ever tasted. And, of course, their first ever taste at stone soup. They can't believe it. But once that pot's empty and all the bellies are full, our traveller gives it a rinse. He gives his stone a rinse. He gives his bowl and his spoon a rinse. He packs it all away and he looks around at all the happy, full faces, and he thinks to himself, I better get myself out of here before they realise. And he starts to shrink his way through the group to get away from the village, when a wee thought comes to his mind. One wee last piece of mischief. He turns and he finds that wee sour-faced wifey, and he walks up and he holds out his hands and says, You've been so kind, so generous, I want to give you something. And into her hand he drops the stone. And he looks her in the eyes and says, Now you look after that, because I reckon that stone's got at least another good 10 stalks left in it. And with that, he spins in his heels, walks from the village, never to be seen again. The reason I really love telling stone soup is I find it's a really good tale to tell with adults and kids in an audience. And of course you get them to tell you what to put in the soup, but you don't give them the chance to put up their hand, you just put them on the spot. It makes it much more fun and interesting, and everyone seems to enjoy it. It's a really unusual story to tell without the audience interaction though, but so much fun all the same. However, you're listening to the Bothy Storytelling Podcast. I'm your host, Calum Lykan, and let's move on to our podcast recommendation. As you know, we are part of the Alberta Podcast Network, and the Alberta Podcast Network has a huge selection of podcasts available throughout the province. And because we've talked about some food and travel, there's a new podcast that looks like that's been invited onto the network. So let's give that a wee shout out, and it is Blue in the Face Podcast. Chris, I'm doing it again. I should have checked the names. Chris Ursaki focuses on the art, culture, music and food in Alberta that is having an impact locally, nationally and even internationally. So that is Blue in the Face Podcast, a member of the Alberta Podcast Network. But remember, there are more podcasts out there, so have a look at the Alberta Podcast Network's website, simply albertapodcastnetwork.com. Have a look at the podcasts, click on the links, have a listen to them. I've recommended a few throughout the show, but there are more to listen to. But in this case, give Blue in the Face Podcast with Chris Ursaki. Hopefully I'm getting his name right. You know, my reputation at getting bad pronunciation. But he is focusing on art, culture, music and food, yum, 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 in Alberta that is having an impact locally, nationally and even internationally. So get along and listen to that. And that is my podcast recommendation for this episode of The Bothy. And of course, what comes after our podcast recommendation but my book recommendation. And as you know, today's podcast is brought to you by Audible, where you can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/Bothy podcast. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle or MP3 player. And of course, we've talked about unusual food combinations. We've talked about travel. So what can I possibly recommend as a book under these circumstances? Well, guys, come on. Think about it. There's only one book in the whole universe that we can talk about and recommend, and that is, of course, Douglas Adams' A Hitchhiker's Guide to a Galaxy, with some of the strangest food combinations in it, and drink combinations, the Pan-Galactic Gargle Blaster, and of course, the infamous expression, always know where your towel is, or something along those lines. Don't quote me on that. But I love A Hitchhiker's Guide to a Galaxy. I remember reading it and it was just an amazing book. And the movies and the TV show, the original BBC one, and the radio plays. And that's what this is on Audible. You can actually get The Hitchhiker's Guide to a Galaxy, the primary phase, dramatised, written by Douglas Adams. It's narrated by Peter Jones, Simon Jones, Geoffrey McGivern, Mark Wing Davies, Susan Sheridan and Stephen Moore, and it is book 1 of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy radio plays. It's about 3 hours, near enough 4 hours actually, to be honest, and it's going for $24.07. Of course, you can get that with your free download for nothing if you take up the 30-day free trial. So you can get the radio play, book 1 of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but they have book 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and onwards. I can't remember how many books there are now. Is it 5 or 6? They did throw in an extra one. I think it's only 5, isn't it? Because the original 4 and then they threw in kind of an extra one. What was it? Mostly Harmless. They may have done another one that I haven't even known about. But Douglas Adams, one of my favourite authors. I love his books. He was a great author. Those were the Dirk Gently series as well, if you really want a couple of more recommendations. But on Audible, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the primary phrase dramatised. The Douglas Adams classic book in radio play format, $24.07, but with the trial through www.audibletrial.com/Bothy podcast, you can get that 30-day free trial and a free audiobook download. So get over to Audible, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You will not regret this one. And with that brings us to the end of another episode of the Bothy Storytelling Podcast. A slightly shorter and hopefully sweeter episode with a lot of tasty treats in mind. Remember to go and find your own stone and start boiling up some soup. Trust me, Scottish recipe, it is beautiful. And if anyone out there who is a listener up in the Slave Lake, Smith area does find that stone, don't worry about it. Keep it, enjoy it, just cherish it. Remember, it's a bit of Scotland, and maybe it'll take you over there, and maybe it'll take you on some fantastic journeys like it did with myself. Thanks for joining me again today, folks, and I hope to hear you all, see you all, and enjoy your company on the next episode of the Bothy Storytelling Podcast.